All right, let's get right into this explainer. We're looking at the absolutely shocking case of 17-year-old Nikita Kasap. Now, this whole thing starts with a horrific discovery in the idyllic, affluent town of Waukesha, Wisconsin. If you know Waukesha, you know it's a very safe, typical Midwest city. People are friendly, and double murders, they are incredibly rare. But what began as just a routine police call in this quiet community would very quickly unravel into a sprawling, deeply disturbing national security threat. So picture this, it's February 28th, 2025. Police respond to a standard wellness check. This was actually called in by a concerned grandmother who hadn't heard from her grandson, Nikita, and thought her son, Nikita's stepfather Donald, was acting really strange over text messages. Well, when investigators arrived at the quiet suburban home, they discovered a scene straight out of a horror movie. In fact, one investigator noted that the smell of decomposition hit them like a wall before they even crossed the threshold.
Section 1. A House of Horrors and the Missing Teen.
Inside, it was a literal nightmare. Investigators found the decomposing bodies of Nikita's mother, Tatiana, and his stepfather, Donald, hidden under blankets and surrounded by these strange, extinguished candles. The parents had been brutally executed, and the house was completely torn apart. We're talking pictures ripped off the walls, beds pulled off the box springs, closets emptied. Police were left frantically asking one huge question. Where on earth is the 17-year-old son? Initially, they actually feared Nikita and the family dog had been kidnapped. Or worse, that a third body was buried somewhere under the piles of clothing scattered all over the floor.
Section 2. The Cross-Country Manhunt.
Well, the reality was incredibly dark. For over 2 weeks, Nikita had actually been covering his tracks by texting his stepfather's boss and his grandmother, literally pretending to be him. After tearing apart the house for valuables, this unlicensed teenager took the family vehicle, loaded up the dog, and bolted, kicking off a massive cross-country manhunt. As you can see on this timeline, after murdering his parents on February 11th, Nikita drove south through Illinois, west through Iowa. He even went sightseeing at a famous truck stop before pushing through Colorado and Wyoming. And the craziest part? The manhunt ended purely by chance on February 28th. He got pulled over in Kansas for rolling through a stop sign. If he had done that just a day earlier, before the car was officially reported stolen, he probably would have just driven off with a traffic ticket. Now, take a look at this list of what they found when they executed a search warrant on his vehicle. It is just a bizarre, unsettling mix. They found the murder weapon, a .357 handgun, over $14,000 in cash, and clothing that absolutely reeked of decomposition. But right next to all that grim evidence were these deeply sentimental items: a Bible, family photo albums, birth certificates for him and his mother, and thankfully, the family dog, who was found alive and well. Oh, and they also discovered memory cards filled with deeply unsettling photos of his parents' bodies, arranged strangely with those candles. Unbelievably, video evidence proved that Nikita actually lived in that basement with his parents' decomposing bodies for over 2 weeks. On one video, you can hear him casually on the phone saying, "You can see his rotten body right there." And while he was living in this house of horrors, actively avoiding the main floor, he was going about doing completely normal, everyday teenager things. He went grocery shopping, grabbed fast food at Culver's, walked the dog, took out the trash, and even shoveled the driveway like nothing happened. Next up, Section 3. Uncovering the twisted motive. When detectives finally flew down to Kansas to interrogate him, they were met with a calm, almost robotic suspect who was just making shallow jokes. It perfectly highlighted this terrifying contrast between his outward persona and his digital reality. I mean, look at the left side here. To the outside world, he was the perfect son, a smart Moldovan immigrant living the American dream, ranked 3rd in his high school class, placing 2nd at regionals for cybersecurity, planning to study STEM at Madison. But then, you look at the right side. Hidden away, this was a kid with no real friends who spent his time online researching mass murders, sharing these horrific war clips dubbed with Russian music known as gore edits, and actively seeking out neo-Nazis and extremists on the messaging app Telegram. Which brings us to Section 4, an assassination plot. Because, as you'll see here, this wasn't just some tragic domestic dispute. It was actually the opening move of a terror plot. Radicalized by these online extremists who basically gave this lonely kid a fake sense of belonging, Nikita murdered his parents to steal funding for a shockingly half-baked, yet deadly serious plan. Step 1, buy a drone. Step 2, weaponize it with an IED. Step 3, use it to assassinate the President and Vice President of the United States. He genuinely, truly believed this act would trigger a total collapse of society, after which he planned to flee to Ukraine to lay low and start a new life. And suddenly, packing those birth certificates and family photo albums makes a whole lot of twisted sense. And here is the real kicker. This was not his first time on the radar. The FBI had actually investigated Nikita 2 years prior, back in 2023, after his own mother reported concerns about his online extremist contacts. Federal agents literally showed up and conducted an investigation, but at the time, there just wasn't enough concrete evidence to charge him with a crime. The tragic reality here is that the warning signs were absolutely there, but the digital space makes these extremist groups incredibly difficult to track and stop before it's too late. Finally, Section 5, the final verdict.
Facing 10 felony charges, Nikita shocked everyone at his arraignment. He showed up in an anti-suicide smock without a shirt, looking exactly like what he was, a scared, skinny teenager. He ultimately pled guilty to 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, basically to keep a super slim chance of future parole by having the state dismiss the other counts. And during sentencing, a tearful Nikita addressed the court. In stark contrast to that robotic demeanor from his interrogation, he apologized. He actually admitted he used to worry about his mom's safety just using a stepladder around the house, yet he was the one who chose to take her life. He admitted he was completely brainwashed by hateful online propaganda into thinking he was part of a justified war and some grand revolution.
His defense leaned really heavily on this number right here, 2007, the year he was born. They argued that because he was just 17 at the time of the murders, he was an impulsive, highly vulnerable child. He was an isolated immigrant who really struggled to make friends in real life, and because of that, he was ruthlessly exploited by older, dangerous online predators who basically recognized a vulnerable kid they could easily manipulate into funding their own extremism. But despite his youth, despite the tears in court, and even his subsequent cooperation with the FBI to help catch the very online predators who radicalized him, the judge was totally unswayed. Weighing the horrific, deeply calculated nature of these domestic murders against a political terror plot, the judge handed down this number: 2. 2 life sentences without the possibility of extended supervision. The court ultimately determined he was simply too dangerous to society, ensuring he will spend the rest of his natural life behind bars. So as we wrap up this explainer, we are left with a truly terrifying cautionary tale. A straight-A student from a loving, affluent home was radicalized into a domestic terrorist without anyone fully grasping the imminent danger until it was entirely too late. It goes to show us just how incredibly fast the internet can become a sinister place. It leaves us all to wonder, and perhaps investigate. Do you really know who the teenagers in your life are talking to online?